Hello. I'm just doing something quickly before the stream begins, which has already begun. Yeah. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I can't zoom anymore because I'm now actually running the mod pack instead. So I have my waypoints back, but I do not have zoom anymore because I just too lazy to combine Optifine into it for some reason. Which might be bad because I already have lag spikes as it is when it comes to this shit. For example, whatever happened there was because of lag. I don't know. But yeah, what's up, guys? It's your boy Sarfnic. We're going to try to finish up the story today. I literally have an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah. I was out again today. For a teensy bit. Visiting some... I was actually visiting one of my old workplaces, believe it or not. It was a different workplace, though. It was, not too far from my house. It was one that was also pretty close to my house. But let's get into this story. Today. To finish it. So, I forgot a detail, which I remember, thankfully, which I will add in now. That was, I mentioned earlier, so... I mentioned how there's this song that was used for a lot of ads. And I think it was the... Do you like pina coladas? And, I was at, like, on the Monday of July 4th, I was at a party, and, like, I actually recognized it, and some, like, old men were surprised, like, oh yeah, I know that song. Well, on the last day of week 4, which was Friday, Friday, July 8th, is it? Yeah, Friday, July 8th. I think. Yeah, Friday, July 8th. Yeah, I can confirm that now. We have this camp video that they do at the end of every 4-week session, so only 2. And your boy only got to see 1, so this is the one I got to see, and I was in it, actually. And they played for, like, the beginning half, they played that song, and I just thought that was, like, funny. Earlier this week, I was talking about this song, and now they're playing it. And I was like, oh, that's a funny detail. I'll remember that detail forever. I'm not sure if the song was that one, but it was a song like that. It was the same song. Anyways, yeah, I am a little sick, by the way, so my throat is messed up. And I'm going to say anyways a lot, because I'm trying to act like a good storyteller when I'm really bad. Also going to drink water. I'm not going to say it, I promise. Continuing on. That's how I shall say it. This is going to be a pretty short stream, and once this wraps up, I'm done telling this story, but I'll probably talk more details about it in the future. Oh, I was telling Troll still this story. Me and Troll were on Hard SMP last night. I was telling him this story a little bit. Then was that Saturday, which was July 9th. And I remember on January 9th, so 6 months earlier exactly, I went to Universal Studios. I went to Universal Islands of Adventure. And that was my first time on a roller coaster in a long time. It felt amazing. I had a flash pass or a fast pass, whatever. I went with my cousin and my aunt's new husband in the future, because they aren't married yet, but they're engaged. My aunt's, not at the time, but now, fiance. And I talked about that guy earlier because that was Florida. Obviously, that happened in Florida. And I talked about him way earlier, like 2 streams ago when I was telling the beginning of the summer story. He's a cool dude. Anyways. Yeah, so it was 6 months later, and I met up with my college friends. Yep, we went to Six Flags, all of us together. My friend Hobbs went, and 2 other dudes. We all met up, and we went to Six Flags, and wow, it was such a fun day. It was so much fun. It was very hot, and we had to wait in a lot of lines, but we actually made friends with some people. I'll tell you 2 scenarios. So, first off, in the line to get the tickets, because I was the only person who hadn't pre-bought the tickets because my parents don't, which sucks because it cost us like 30 minutes. We had to wait 30 minutes in the line. Off the bat, we met these 2 guys from the army. And we were talking to him, and he was telling us how he was like, oh, I didn't feel like going to college right away. I was like, let me just join the military or whatever. I'll just say the military because I don't know if it was the army or the Marines or whatever. But nah, man, it was a waste of 2 years of my life. It was horrible. And I kind of just like, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, because I know people who say they want to do it, and I kind of like relate this story to them. Like, well, I met a guy who wanted to do it, or did it, and he changed his mind after like 2 years. He's like, yeah, I wasted 1.5 years in this stupid thing. I'm leaving after this. He was just telling us how like they would like wake you up in the middle of the night, and even like they make you stare at like a wall sometimes. Like they'd straight up be like, you have to stare at a wall for like 3 hours. but not like you said to be in a room where like you stared at a wall for 3 hours. And it was like so stupid things. He's like, yeah, man, I should have just gone to college right away. I'm like, well, I guess I should be happy where I am right now, in college and all that. And then we left that dude as we got into the park, and we were like, oh, we'll see you around, man. And we actually ended up seeing him like literally about 5 hours later. So we didn't have a fast pass, so we waited in these lines, and it was a very hot, sunny day. The lines are pretty long. Some of them I had to wait an hour 20 minutes. I believe for 2 rides we had to wait an hour 20 minutes. So this is Six Flags Great America in Gurnee, Illinois, where there was a little shootout, and it trended on Twitter, and even Keemstar talked about it in August, like over a month later though. But yeah, it was so much fun. I have a lot of videos from it of just us hanging out. We just chatted for a long time. Great, great. Now I have less time to tell this damn story. Rah! Anyways, might as well plant some berry bushes around here too. But now I can tell it in full detail. Hopefully no interruptions. So, continuing. Yeah, we were at Six Flags. We were having a good time. And waiting on our lines, just chatting, looking at Discord and stuff. And this was like the halfway point of my summer job. I really missed this day. It was such a fun day. Got to talk to my friends, just relax. Nothing was wrong. You know what I mean? Like, everything was just a good time back then. I still had a lot of good memories ahead of me, as I shall soon get to. Those were good days. Those were good days. But then it came to a close. But there was one thing. So there's just like, in the first place I had to ever wait for, the first ride we went on was this like, I don't even remember what it was called. It was called Max Force or something. No, I can't remember right now. It's been too long. And there was this like person, this Muslim girl or whatever, you know, like wearing the hijab and stuff. But she looked pretty young. But I thought she was a kid back then. Like, just I was randomly like looking around, and this girl was just staring at me. I was like, "What the fuck?" But she was like way ahead of me in line, and I just never looked again. I just remember like, why was this person just staring at me? I thought it was a kid. I'm like, this is a kid just staring at me. And then after that ride, a little while later, we run into her again. It was like 2 rides later, so like an hour or 2 later, and we're like, what the fuck? And she's staring at me again. And I even like wave at her, and she like waves back. Like, I'm so confused. And she had a friend she was with, and then we were on the same ride. It was like this little like octopus ride. It wasn't a roller coaster. There are 2 non-roller coaster rides we went on, and this is one of them. And then we went to get lunch after that, so we were like at lunch for like 40 minutes. We go on another ride, and I see her again in the line, and I'm like waving at her. And then we leave, and then I think she was ahead of us in line again. So again, I'm like, what the fuck? And then I see her after a different ride. Hold on a second. I swear to God, dude, I'm not gonna be able to finish this. I'll have to do it in 2 weeks. I'm coming home in 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks, so yeah. I swear I'll have to finish the story in 3 weeks. Or 2 weeks. Again. Wait more weeks, but anyways, I'll continue as much as I can at least. Then we went on a different ride, and she wasn't there. And then leaving this other different ride, I saw her again, and it was like the last time, and she was with her friend or whatever. And I tried talking to her, but I don't think she really cared. It was like, so you stare at me for so long, and I try to talk to you, and you don't give a fuck? Like, what? And she was probably like, she was an adult woman, I can tell now. Just really short. So, yeah, I was very, very confused by it, but my friends thought it was super funny, so guess you give it that. And then we move on to the rest of it. There's this ride called, I forget what it's called, something squared, V squared, velocity, whatever. That's when you're into like the army guys again. We did this water ride that had such a fucking long wait. It was unironically like a hour, 30-minute wait. But you get wet. I remember there was these girls in front of us that we were like kept like screaming at. Like they would wave to us and scream, and we wave at them and scream. And it was so much fun. Overall W time. And we did a bunch more rides to end, but we had to skip some because it was just too crowded of a park that day. And the sun set around like 8:40. And so at 9 o'clock we left. I remember getting dipping dots. I remember our last ride we did was bumper cars. It was so much fun. I got a bumper car with my friend. There's this little kid who like, gave a smirk at me. I went after him a bit. A little kid with his dad. And his dad was the one driving, obviously. But he was like the one controlling it, you know what I mean? Man, my nose is a little messed up from being sick. So sorry, guys. I thought it was super sick, though. It was such a sick thing to do. Just go out there and have a good time. Bumper cars. I hadn't done bumper cars since like May of 2017, so it was so much fun. I haven't done laser tag since May of 2017. I want to do laser tag again. There's all these fun games I like to do, like capture the flag, dodgeball, bumper cars, laser tag, and some of them I gotta do later on this summer. Hopefully I'll get to them today. And then my dad picked me up, and I was just like, this was such a W experience. And I saw a lot of movies that week too. Like I saw the Buzz Lightyear movie. And then on the following Monday, I saw the new Thor movie, Thor Love and Thunder. I actually saw it recently at college again. as well as I saw like somewhat recently at college. I saw Spider-Man: No Way Home again because they do like, these little showings and stuff. But sometimes when I rewatch a Marvel movie, like for example, I saw Black Widow last year at college, but the first time I saw it was like over the summer, and I liked it more the second time I watched it, Black Widow. But Thor: Love and Thunder, I actually liked it more the first time I watched it. And that Sunday, I remember I did nothing that Sunday, July 10th. But then Monday, July 11th was one of the craziest days as a counselor. So I was still at my usual location, but there was a new group and new kids and everything. So I wasn't with my usual kids. The reason why I was there on the Monday and why they didn't take me to that new camp yet was because they needed me because one counselor was out for the Friday before, but someone had covered them for that Friday. And then the Monday. And so I was there for that Monday to deal with the 1 week group. Yes, the 1 week group of kids. The purple group. And boy, they were crazy that week. They were insane that week. And so some kids got shifted around, like one girl that was in the green group was now in the blue group for some reason. This girl would like really get on everyone's nerves. I never dealt with her because she was in my group, but like some of the teachers were telling me that they were so pissed off that she was back. And there's this other girl who was in the blue group that they actually became good friends, and they were like a menacing duo. And then I remember one person was like literally ranting to me like, why would they put these two girls together, man? It was the biggest mistake ever. I'm like, I don't know. Ask my boss. She should have known. But anyways, I had a lot of kids this time. It was like one of the largest purple groups ever. There was this one girl who seemed really young. She was like too scared to leave. She had a babysitter, so like the babysitter stayed until like we absolutely had to take the kids in. And we had this other girl who was like super calm, but kind of like fancy smancy, like wearing like a dress and stuff. But it sounds weird I'm mentioning this, but it's important, okay? I wouldn't mention something, but it's not important. Well, sometimes I will mention non-important stuff, but and like she had like a mask on and stuff. And then there was these older girls. I remember their names. I'm not gonna say it though, but one of them had a name very similar to Ren Dog, so I kept comparing them to Ren Dog in my head. Which, well, I kind of just gave it away. Their name was Ren, but they had a W in front of the R. But yeah, I remember this girl, bro. She was mean. Like when I first met her, she was automatically mean. Like she was just straight up mean to like me, but like in like a smart ass kind of way. Like she was kind of like too old to be her or whatever. Just this white girl. She was just kind of too old to be her. I forget what she did exactly at first to make me know she was mean, but I remember the stuff she did later on. But I remember like that. The drama teacher, lovely guy. This is the last day I ever got to see him, I think actually. Here's what happened. She like threw her lunchbox into like a basket, and he was like, what, how could you? He was like, don't do that, what's your name? And she's like, what, you want my social security number too? And he was so mad, so like I was on my lunch break at the time, he stormed into like our office. I think he was like on his break too, and just on his break, and he was like, this girl. Actually, I think he was. He just stormed because he was angry. He's like, this girl just said that to me. I'm like, oh, let me guess. It was Ren. And he was like, yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, brother. That girl's gonna be a mess to deal with. And so we had done like a puppet show. I think week 2. We did puppet shows and drama or whatever. And so I had to give the tour to the purple kids. And let's say this tour went very wrong. I didn't tell my bosses about this because I didn't want them to know about this because this is a really embarrassing moment for me. But pretty much we went to the drama room, which is my old kindergarten room, by chance. I had little kindergarten now. Like over like 11 years later, I'm like working as a counselor here. Did I hear Enderman? I think I did. Anyways, and oh my god, I need to get this fucking heal. I need to get villager trades going. I don't want to lose this pickaxe, you know. Switch to iron temporarily, I guess. There we go. It's slower, but it will do the job. We went into the drama room, and I was like telling them, like, oh yeah, here we go. We have these puppets here. I showed them the puppets because I was an idiot. And I was like, yo, unfortunately, yeah, a couple weeks ago we used these puppets, but Fortunately, this week you guys aren't going to be using these puppets because it's not Puppets Week. And they're cute little animal puppets like zebras and like lions and elephants and even whales. We did like a whole puppet show with them one time. It was so much fun. I remember. I don't remember. I didn't talk about it because I don't remember what. I think it was week 2. It might have been week 3, but it was one of those weeks. And then this girl, it was like on a box, like hanging up. She takes a bunch of the puppets and like spreads out. And there's this other girl who was part of the purple group the week before, who was also like instigating it. So they were like working together to fuck with me. And I was like, bruh. And they're like running around with the puppets. I'm like, guys, we gotta keep giving the tour. And they were like, I was trying to get it back, and they wouldn't be giving it back. And remember how I mentioned there's this fancy smancy girl? She was like kind of getting like freaked out, like, why aren't they listening? And I was like, don't worry, girl, I got this. It was such a bad moment on my part that I couldn't deal with that. Kids like doing that. If my boss had seen it, they'd 100% be like, bruh, you have to just yell at them. I'm like, I don't want to yell at kids, you know what I mean? So it was a mess. And finally, I was able to get them to give back the puppets. And there was like this other older girl too who would sometimes participate in it, but she looked really old. Like these kids were probably about to start middle school. They were like in their 11s, like, or they were like 11 years old. You know what I mean? So like it was really like, how are these kids even at this camp? But this girl would really not behave that well at all. But she was a funny one, I'll tell you that. And so I remember after that day, that chaotic day, it was like, all right, cool. Well, I'm not gonna be here the next 3 days. I literally was like, bye, thank you. I want to go somewhere else. I don't want to deal with these kids. Such a mess this girl was, dude. But I also remember she did other stuff too. Like I literally remember this story a second ago, but now I can't remember it. It's so weird. Oh yeah, so we went to this. I showed them our counselor room, and it's like a room where like we do stuff with counselors and stuff. So we rarely use it, but we use it sometimes. And there were like these pool noodles there. And anyways, we had like a bit of free time so we could chill there. This girl, the same girl, and a lot of other crazy little kids in that group, took a bunch of the pool noodles and started fighting with it. I was like, guys, stop. But I just couldn't deal with it, bro. I've never had kids act like that before, and didn't have any more kids act like that before after this point. And it was just horrible. I'm like, oh my god. And then the same fancy smancy girl was like, I'm scared. Just seeing all that. And I was like, alright, I'm going to take you to the main office. Took her to the main office. I was like, I was telling my boss, I was like, oh yeah, this girl just needs a break from all the chaos of that group. And she's like, alright. And I went to get her, like, a few minutes later. Like 10, 15 minutes later. But yeah, it was just a mess. That group was crazy. And I mentioned earlier how there's this girl who was, like, kind of, like, a little, like, emotional to go to camp because they were just kind of, like, scared. Our bosses, like, warned us ahead of time, like, that might be a sign that, like, the kid is, like, underaged or, like, younger than 6 years old, which means they shouldn't be allowed to sign up. And what I've heard from them is the rules are, like, if a kid signs up or a parent signs up their kid and, like, lies about their age, usually you just let the kid show up to camp anyways, but, like, you forgive it, but you don't forget it, you know what I mean? You remember that parent lied to you just to get their kids off their hands. I mean, they did probably still have to pay the fee, which is like a couple $100, so like, yeah. And I heard some other girls talking about that girl only being 5 years old, so like I tipped off like one of the, not my boss, but like my boss's assistant. I was like, oh yeah, this girl might be a little younger than we think. And they're kind of like, oh, okay, I'll look into it. But nothing came of it until later, at least. Because I moved on to a different camp. Yep. It was at the way southeast side of town. It was near like this one beach camp that I was sent to for a day. If I definitely mentioned it, I hope. Oh good, I was almost about to die from that. Or I would have died if I kept going. But it was a fun thing. That's all I could say. Switching camps to a new one. I got to meet a bunch of new kids, but it was actually all of their second day, so I wasn't acquainted with them yet. But it was at the way southeast side of town. It's more to know where I live, and most of the camps I worked at were on the northeast side of town. This was the way southeast side of my town. My town's pretty huge, so I had to bike there. So it wasn't a tough bike trip or anything, but on the first day already, I got to meet some fun kids. So I had two other coworkers. They were both women. They were like counselors. except one of them was technically a teacher slash counselor, but at the place where I worked at, it was just teachers. Like, the teachers would act as counselors, but here, teachers would be also counselors because, you know, camps. I don't know how to fucking describe it, okay? I'll work on the wall now. But, anyways, it was a fun time. One of them was like a year behind me in high school, but I recognized her just from seeing her around, I guess. I don't know. And then the other one was like a college student somewhere else, so I'd never met her before. But I was only there for 3 days. Like, it wasn't that long. It wasn't even it was 2 days less than a full week. But I'll tell you, it was quite a fun experience. Except there was no AC and it was at a fucking shed where the camp was. But they were fun kids. I don't remember most of their names now, because, remember, this is the camp I spent... No, other than the one I spent half a day at, this was the one I spent the least amount of time at. So, I kind of just forgotten most of the details of who exactly was who there, but it was a very fun time. 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But let's talk about the kids. So there's this one girl who looks just like Anna Sophia Robb's character from the movie Bridge to Terabithia, which I've actually seen twice. I saw it twice in March. So I was kind of thinking, I was like, this girl reminds me so much of her. She was such a fun girl. Apparently, she went to this camp with her cousins, but apparently she's from like North Carolina or something, but just comes here in the summer. Comes here every summer and does camp here every summer, apparently. So, yeah, it was everyone else's first time. Because it turns out the teachers I was working with were like, it turns out that camp I was transferred to for like half a day, they spent the first 3 weeks there. And then they got switched here because this new camp started up. And like every week it was like a 1 week camp, but like they did it 3 times. And did they? Week 4 or 5. No, they just did it twice, I guess. And they were like, I told them that I was at that other one, which was kind of nearby this one, and they're like, oh, we were there earlier, and they were asking me about it. And they're like, oh, we hope to go back. And I think they said to me, they're like, oh, we're going back next week. The boss is like, you're going back next week. And I was like, and they're asking me about like the new person who worked there. I talked about this counselor, this teacher who worked at that other camp and like tried to have me. She played fucking Red Rover, and a kid got injured, and tried to have me walk a kid to like the other camp that was like 20 minutes away on walk, and I was like, no. Yeah, that one. And I was just kind of like, oh, they're doing good, you know. And they're like, oh, we want to go back there so bad because that camp ended at 1:30. And so they were both telling me like how like, oh yeah, like we'd be done by 1:30. And so we'd be like, oh, but we still have a full day left. Like, what am I gonna do for the rest of the day after work? But now here they're done at 3:30, and they're like, oh, we're just exhausted after the day. Because this camp stuff usually lasts 8:30 to 3:30, but for them there it was 8:30 to 1:30. So these guys I spent the least amount of time with, so I have the least. I kind of forgot that I went to this camp. It's so weird. But there's fun kids there. The boys were a bit crazy. So there's this girl, obviously, who reminded me of Anna Sophia Robb. She was quite fun. I kind of messed with her a little bit. Like, she used to be like, don't touch my hair. And I stopped doing this because it was kind of weird, actually, I realized. But I would, like, touch her hair as a joke. And she'd be like, no. And it had a pretty big tire swing there. And I learned how to swing a tire swing. And it was super fun, but also kind of dangerous, okay? And it could fit at most 3 kids, but the best amount of kids to have on it for it to swing high was like 2. So usually we'd have about 2 kids on it, and she loved when I pushed her on the tire swing. This girl was old. She must have been like 10 or 9. Probably 10 years old. And she'd always do funny stuff. I just can't remember what I was thinking about for a bit. But like, she like one time would do self-defense. Oh, she taught me this thing I later on used on a different camp, where like it's like open the, like you hold out your hand and make a jar. It's like open the jar, put your finger in, clean the jar, and it's like, thank you for cleaning my pee-pee. It's super funny. It's honestly hilarious, dude. And it was just a really small, it had a pretty huge playground, but it was a shed next to a playground, and it really sucked. I hated working there. We had no AC. They had like this little fan in there, and I would use the fan sometimes. I'd be like, turn on the fan. I just need to breathe fresh air for a tiny bit. I really hated the location, honestly. And so did my coworkers, obviously, because they missed their old place. Hey, we both missed our old places. Isn't that nice? And I just remember there were some other kids too. There were a lot of boys who like to play like Among Us games and like fake roleplay games and stuff. They were fun kids though. And there was this boy and girl. One of them was named Clark, I think, but I don't remember the girl's name. And they had actually done this. Remember I mentioned like there was a day where we had an escape room in my camp, and like they like had to like move another camp there because there was like a vote. It was a voting day. Yeah, these kids apparently did that one, and I was like, oh my god, you guys did? Because I was telling them about where I worked. Like, oh, we were there that one day. I'm like, oh yeah. I didn't obviously remember seeing them because back then I didn't know them, but there was this boy and girl, and I think the girl had an older brother too, but he only showed up for one day, I think. And the girl only showed up for 2 of the days. I think she skipped the Wednesday, but was there on the Thursday and Tuesday. And the boy was there all 3 days, but this little boy and girl, they're the same height. They're both white kids, and their parents can pick each other up on the pickup list. And apparently they went on a trip to Hawaii together. Apparently they're neighbors. Apparently they've known each other their whole life. And they do multiple camps together. And apparently okay, so look, that means from an obvious standpoint, those two are like lovers or some shit. But they're little kids, so you don't ship little kids, right? Like, that's fucking messed up. Don't ship little kids, right? But they ship each other, apparently. Or at least the boy was like, somehow someone brought up a topic about, like, talking about crushes and stuff. And the boy was like, oh, she's my crush. And for some reason, she seemed annoyed. She seemed pretty annoyed when he mentioned that she was his crush. She was like, whatever, stop. And he was like, but it's true, though. And I remember, not me, but the other 2 counselors were talking, and they were like, do you think those 2 will ever end up together? I just heard this conversation from, like, afar. And she was like, maybe. Like, yeah, I mean, like, or those 2 end up getting married or whatever, because, like, seriously. They're, like, childhood besties. And, you hear those, like, love stories about, like, childhood besties who end up, like, getting married and stuff. You just can't help but wondering, do you think those guys are examples of that? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows if I'll ever see those kids again? Probably not. But, yeah. I invented this fun game that a lot of kids got into, including those 2. Where, like, it was on the first day, actually. And I think I continued it on the last day a little bit. It was like a spaceship game. And there's this kid named Guillermo, or whatever. This Hispanic kid. And I remember he got into it really well. As well as that girl that reminded me of Anne Sophia Robb. It was this game, like, where I invented, like, where they were, like, spaceship adventurers, and they would, like, travel around. Like, I'd go on the tire swing and push them, and then they'd land on the playground and, like, fight aliens, and they really enjoyed it, actually, but it was kind of hard to coordinate among kids, so it's something I never did again at any other camps. But this place was like it was like a camp that had a theme. Every week they would change the theme, and this week it was like ocean theme. I remember on that last day we created like turtles out of clay. It was super fun. I never got to see the finale of it though, because I was obviously gone the next day. And it was a fun couple 3 days, and there was this boy who was really he was another silly kid. He was really young, like he was probably 6. He looked like my neighbor. The one I mentioned had an incident with and was in a wheelchair. He looked just like him as a little kid, because obviously I knew that guy as a little kid, and well, I was a little kid too, but I've seen photos, okay. And I just remember thinking like, oh, he looks so much like. And sorry, I think someone just came in. No one did. He was a fun kid, let's say. One time he took out my mask he took my phone too from my pocket, and he would also take out my mask and like run away with it. I had to get it back. He even like one time ran out of the park property. I had to get him back. It was kind of a mess. Because I'd heard situations at my usual workplace where like, oh, yeah, some kids have like sometimes like the worst scenarios when a kid runs out of the camp and like leaves the property, because then you have to like chase after them. It's like, oh jeez. Thankfully I didn't have to deal with that, but this one was like he just accidentally like, wandered out and we had to get him quickly. But he was a menace of a kid. Like, we had like pool noodles in the shed where we spent. We didn't even spend much time in the shed. We were outside most. It was such a horrible place. It was so hot. At the end of the day because of it. And I remember like he one time like took a bunch of pool noodles and like tried to fight me with it, and I let this kid get away with this bullshit. But one time, and it wasn't my boss's boss was nearby, so I was very pissed off about this. His grandma was asking me like when like they dropped him off, like, I heard that he took your mask. I have no idea how she knew about this. The kid probably snitched on himself, to be honest. And I was like, oh yeah, he took my mask, whatever. And of course my fucking boss's boss was like right there when this happened, hearing this whole conversation. And he was like, oh, you could discipline him though. Kids need discipline. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I'm not gonna do that, but whatever. And then later on, I only ever made 2 mistakes on my camp job that if one of my bosses was around, I could get fired for it. This one was like the lesser of so. But on the tire swing, I was pushing him and like the girl that reminded me of Anne Sophia Robb, whatever. And I remember the kid was telling me to slow down, but I didn't slow down. And then he hit his head on one of the chain things. It wasn't that bad, but he started crying. And I felt so bad because like the kid was telling me to slow down and I didn't. And then his dad was asking me about it, and I was telling him the truth. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. It was my fault when we picked him up. And I remember it was the last day there. It was Thursday, so I'm like, well, I won't have to deal with that kid anymore. But this kid was a menace. He reminded me of that girl from the first week who was so crazy and nuts. Very similar energies. The girl who I said went to Morocco, which just shocked me. She'll be relevant again later, don't worry. But yeah, he reminded me of that girl. And obviously I didn't go the next day. And I remember like they're going to the beach because, well, I had to be back at my usual camp. I remember being like, ha, good luck. And the next day was the Friday. And I was returning back to my usual camp. I'd been there on Monday, and I was gone for the whole week. And on the Thursday, the previous day, they had a field trip. And I was bummed out to miss it. But from what I heard from my bosses, it was an ass field trip. Like, it was worse than the first one we went on. They went to like some place in the south side of Chicago to like view plants or whatever, because it was like Mexico week. The theme of the camp that week was Mexico week. Yeah, we had a theme each week. Like the first week it was Greece week, but I don't remember. And the costume party we based off of it too. Like the costume party of Greece week was like a toga party, but I don't remember what the other ones were. We had like a like a Fiji week, I think was the last week, but I don't think I ever got to see that sadly. But anyways, week 5 was Mexico week. That's all I remember. And coming back to that camp felt weird. It felt like I went on an adventure to another realm for 3 days, and I come back, and, well, I heard from the people running the Purple group that that girl, Ren, was indeed a menace, and she had done some menacing things. And literally my boss was telling me, like, oh, I was telling my husband, who, I met that guy twice, but before back then I only met him once. He's a nice guy. She was telling him how, like, this girl was mean to adults. And he was just like, oh god, one of those kids. But it was her last day, thankfully, so we were all pretty thankful. And, well, I was here to help out with beach day. But the issue was, it had rained that entire day. We couldn't even go outside. And so I felt bad for the people at the other camp, like, oh god, well, they probably spent the whole day, like, under a shed. They didn't even get to do it. At least our place, we have, like, inside facilities at this place. That place, they didn't have any inside facilities. So it was a mess for them, I bet. But yeah, it was sad because I wanted to like push kids on the swing because I was really good at pushing kids really high, but I couldn't do that day because, well, and it was my last day. That was my last day at my usual location, and I was just kind of like a floater. Like I would help out with the red group. I was supposed to help out with the red group that day, but then halfway through the day, the regular counselor would come back, and then I'd be just like helping out with the beach. But then I couldn't help out with the beach because we didn't go to the beach, so I just felt kind of useless that day. Plus, so I got to reunite with my red group kids, right? But 2 of them were gone. So this one boy who was really into Star Wars, he was such a fun kid. He always made me Star Wars origami. I remember on the last day of the 4th week, we were doing like a little arts tour of everyone's like final projects, and he like, this is such a funny moment, I forgot to mention this. On the end of the 4th week, he was like talking about his like origami, and like we had the whole camp there, and he told them, oh yeah, I made art for Sarfnic, let's just say, and he kept like rejecting me. I made origami for him, and then for some reason every single kid in the camp was like, oh, how could you to me, and even including the arts teacher was like, how could you, Sarfnic? That was super funny. It was a super funny moment. Like I wish like if that moment would be like, if there were like compilations of like funny moments from my life, like a watch back, that would be one of them, 100%, from like a third point of view. It's so funny. Anyways, I shall continue. Just struggling to figure out what to do. I guess I'll work on the house a bit. Work on the interior design, whatever. start by shoveling the ground, I guess. I remember, yeah, that kid was missing, and then as well as the girl who was like cousins with someone I know. She was also gone that week on vacation. She was apparently, or gone that day. She had like left the previous day, so she was there Thursday, but not fucking Friday, of course, and was gonna be gone the whole next week. And I was like, oh, so and those kids were like my two most classic kids from the red group. I'm like, great. So 2 kids from this group aren't even gonna be here, aren't even here today. We don't get to go to the beach. We don't get to go outside because it's raining. What a sucky day. And I remember this is the only time, because I live, what, fucking 5 minutes away from this place, so like, this day was the only day I had one of my parents drop me off because it was just so bad rain. Yeah, overall, I was pissed off that I didn't get a good goodbye, good last day, but yeah, it was funny. I got to see how the purple group was doing. We ended up watching a movie, Coco, that Friday. And the previous Friday, we watched the movie Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And this is the only day that we actually got to finish the movies we started, because usually we just run out of time. But this day we actually got to finish it, which was nice, I suppose. Wow, I already have a stack of dirt. Oh. And it was just a goodbye for some of these kids. Some kids were done after that. There's this one girl who attended the previous 4 weeks, but she was part of the purple 1 week group for this week, so she only was going to stay for 5 weeks. It was her last day. And I remember like, oh, I remember when she was jabbing off, like, maybe we'll see you again, maybe we won't. And well, I guess I never found out. But it was just a sad day overall. And it was the day, actually, that I did the stream. I did a stream. This is stream number 6, right? Number 5, number 4. It was the time I did number 3. I think stream number 3 was right after this day. So I probably talked about this then a little bit. But it was just a gloomy day overall for me because I knew it was my last day. I was pretty sad just thinking about that, though. But who knew that I had a very fun time ahead of me? 2 more camps I would attend in 3 more weeks. But yeah, it was a sad day. And I remember that girl who I mentioned who I thought was like 5 years old. Apparently my boss's assistant was like, she's not. But that girl started crying during the movie Coco. We finished the movie Coco, but there was like the scary scene where like, what is his name? Ernesto de la Cruz like seizes like the boy and like throws him into a pit. She started like crying during that scene. And so I was with my with again the same person just by chance, the assistant director. And I kind of like was like, that girl's crying. I kind of whispered at her. She's like, oh, thanks. I didn't even notice that. And then we had to take that girl out. It was kind of sad. She didn't get to finish the movie, but I swear that girl was fucking 5 years old. Like, she was like emotionally like obviously just saying a kid's 5 years old, having someone say that is not enough evidence, but also them being like emotionally like weak. Literally at our training, our boss is like warning us about that. Like, that's a telltale sign that that kid is like not old enough to be here. If they're like having separation anxiety or scared of weak movie scenes, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was that. The crazy or the mean girl was still pretty mean that week. I heard that she'd done more mean stuff, and she was just a mess. And they were happy to see her not back this week. But I remember she watched Coco with us, and she made actually a pretty funny joke that made the assistant director, who's my boss's assistant, whatever, laugh. Yeah, I should just call him. I don't know why I call him my boss, the director, and then not my boss's assistant, the assistant director. I should use that as a way to talk about it, because other camps also had directors that we'll probably get into later. But this was the only camp at the moment that I worked at that actually was big enough to have a director. She made like a funny joke about a ghost for some reason, like, oh, a ghost asked for my phone number, and for some reason the assistant director actually laughed at it, and I thought it was kind of funny too. But yeah, it was my last day, and I got to talk to some other people. Like, I got to talk to like our circus teacher, who was someone I was really friendly with, this girl. But she'd only show up every other week because she had some other job, so she was like switching back and forth between it, and they didn't want to hire her, but they had no choice. It was either they hire her or they have no teachers, so because no one else applied for the job, so they hired her. I remember telling her like, oh, I'm switching to a new camp next week again. And she was like, well, you should be grateful. At least like they're having you, at least you're having like job working opportunities, because when the camp like leveled down or downsized because less kids signed up, they started to like tell some other people, like some of the teachers, to like come in later, and so they get paid less, obviously. And so she was pissed off about that. She was like, "Oh yeah." She wasn't like saying be grateful in like a mean way. She's more like, "Oh yeah, you're kind of lucky though, 'cause at least you get to come in, right?" And so I was like, "Oh yeah, that's true." At least you get to come in, and plus I actually would have made less money if I had stayed, because I was supposed to be at my original camp for week 6, but they're like, "Oh, you can come in like later on in the day because we don't need you in the mornings anymore." So I remember my boss, the director, telling me like, "Oh yeah, at least you'll get paid more now at a different camp." Because this movement for me to be at a different camp week 6 was like last minute AF. So yeah, it was a pretty sad day, and I had a feeling it'll be my last day there, and it was my last day there, but I didn't have confirmation back then. However, it wasn't the last time I got to go there, which I'll get into in the future. I'll probably have to talk about that tomorrow because I've only got like 20 minutes left. Lol. But yeah, and then that weekend, literally nothing happened that weekend if I remember correctly. Oh, I went to the beach one time. Yes, the same beach that we go to for these camps. I went to the beach and went swimming with my dad, and the water was like so wavy. It was like stormy out. It was kind of bad. I didn't enjoy it that much. But anyways, what have I been streaming for? Oh, Will Nader's here. Oh my god, I miss Will Nader. Hi, Will Nader. I'm just playing Minecraft and telling a story. Give if I missed you, man. Anyways, where did I leave off? Yes. Then came Monday, July 18th, at a new camp. Well, it was this sports camp, actually. It was a sports camp. And I had done this sports camp as a kid. And I remember one of the girls who did the 4-week camp, or the first 4 weeks at our camp, switched to this camp, and I knew that because she had a friend who was like, "Oh, she's at sports now," and I didn't have 100% confirmation, but I had a feeling that it was this one. So, I'm just telling stories right now, by the way, while I play Minecraft and telling the stories of my summer and stuff, while I dig up ground, lol, to build this house. Cause I should make a shovel probably. Anyways. And I was worried about this because it was a sports camp, and I know one of my other coworkers was telling me on the Friday previously, like, "Oh, you love running out with the kids. You'll enjoy sports camp." I was like, "I don't know. I have no idea." And so I was a little worried, but let's say it worked out. So I arrived here, and this camp, one person worked here, who I knew from like middle school and high school, but mostly middle school. He was this black dude named Kevin, but everyone called him KD, but I always called him Kevin because that's kind of how I knew him as. And I knew that he worked there because my brother said he saw him at the beach one time telling kids to behave, and like they were wearing the uniform, and I was like, "Ha, that dude!" It's so ironic hearing that dude telling kids to behave because in middle school he would like literally look at fucking porn on his laptop. Well, he was a counselor that summer, and he was actually one of the high-ranked ones, like. Literally the camp director there, who was this, like, chill dude, would, like, talk to him all the time and be like, "Yo, man, you're doing a good job." But, yeah, I got to meet the camp director, and he gave me a group, and apparently there were, like, changes in the groups this week, because they got, like, a huge influx of kids for week 6 for some reason. And this camp also was 3 weeks, so it was the last week of the session, and I was put with this group that were called the Cubs. Not the Sox, the Cubs, but there were like different groups of different ages. I was put with the youngest kids. So like the baseball league were like the young kids, like the 7 and 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds were like the baseball team. So it was Sox and Cubs. And there was the football team was like, I don't know, it was either like the group above or the group above. It was like probably like 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. And then there was the basketball league, which was like 12-year-old, 13-year-olds, and they had their own situations, but I never got to interact with those kids that were in the older groups, only the kids that were in the younger group that I worked with. And so I work with the Cubs in the morning, and then in the afternoon they'd combine the Cubs with the Sox to form MLB. So I probably shouldn't be saying this because this probably gives out a lot of detail about what this camp is and how it works. And if any of the people working there saw this video, they'd be like, "Yeah, this guy's telling our secrets." But I remember I arrived, and it was two counselors I was working with. One of them who was 14 years old, starting high school, and his birthday was in July, so like July 2nd or something. So in June, when he was working this job at first, he was 13. And he was telling me how he got like illegally hired or whatever. And then another one was a 15-year-old counselor. They're both white boys. And they both went to the same high school as I went, but obviously none of them started until after I graduated, so that's something. And I'll get into more counselors later, but I remember I met this kid right away. He was half Asian, half black. He had an Asian mom, and I met his mom, but I never got to meet his dad, but a black dad, presumably. And I remember he reminded me of my fucking roommate the previous semester, who was also half Asian, half black, and I didn't get along with him at all, my old roommate. And this kid was a menace. He was the most, like, goof-off kid I've ever met, ever. Obviously, there's that one girl from the previous week who was the most, like, evil kid I ever met. This boy was the most, like, goof-off kid I ever met. He would, like, literally sing Juice WRLD lyrics, and other counselors would be like, bro, how does he know Juice WRLD lyrics? And in the first 10 minutes I met him, he was already annoying as fuck, this kid. He would always, like, just talk a bunch of random crap to counselors. And he was, like, 7 years old, too. He was a young kid. And according to the other counselors at the start of the summer, he was, like, a nice behaved kid, but he just got too comfortable, so he just started talking a lot of crap, I guess. And again, I have a opinion. No kid is, like, a bad kid. Because, like, I remember I was talking about this earlier, this girl who was pretty bad at my old location. Not the one who was, like, she was there the whole 8 weeks, and she, like, paired up with another girl, and, like, they were a pretty bad duo. I remember the music teacher was telling me, oh yeah, I hate that. I wish that girl knew how bad of a kid she was. And I was like, when she's an adult, I'm like, bruh, like, she's just a kid, bro. Like, kids' personalities aren't bad, unless they're, like, murderers. They aren't bad. But, yeah, this kid was bad, but I didn't think he was a bad kid, obviously, because, well, his personality's only developing. But he was just a menace. It's just an annoying kid. He even would, like, talk about how he would, like, jump people all the time, and I was like, what are you talking about, man? Like, what? Like, I'll jump you, he'd say to counselors. I'm like, bro, do you know what that means? Seriously. It's so annoying. Is everyone else in chat? No, I was just willing here for 1 second. And then I remember we were waiting for 2 more kids. There's this one, like, there's just a bunch of little kids. They would always trade Pokemon cards, these kids. Pokemon cards, I guess, blew up amongst the youth yet again because it's popular again somehow in 2022. At least summer 2022. Which surprised me because I thought kids were into video games, but these kids really are dependent on technology, which is nice. Surprising, too. Especially seeing that it's like a post-COVID era we're in right now. But, then they're like, oh, there's 2 more girls arriving. And I remember they had switched up the groups apparently, because I remember the 14-year-old counselor was telling the 15-year-old counselor, he's like, oh, these 2 girls, they only are here in the mornings, and you never met them because, so this 14-year-old counselor, this blonde boy, whatever, he could only work in the mornings because he was like 14 and 13 when he got hired, and so it was like illegal for him to work the full 7-hour day, whatever. So it's like, okay, we get it. And then this other counselor, he had just switched to working full day. He usually, the 15-year-old counselor, he would usually work afternoons only because he had summer school at when you're turning a sophomore, a lot of kids do summer school for wellness. At my high school, I did it in summer of 2018, and this guy was doing the same thing. So, yeah, when you're 15, whatever, you tend to do this like wellness over the summer course at my high school. I did it in summer of 2018. It was so much fun, and it was kind of like nostalgic talking to these guys about it. Even though they're 4 years younger than me, they have the same exact experiences with the same exact teachers, and the same exact like location and everything. It's kind of cool, isn't it? It's kind of like when you hit a certain age, you can talk to people like 5 years younger than you and actually have a conversation with them. Because like when I was 15, I couldn't have a real good conversation with a 10-year-old, but when I'm 19, I can talk with a 14-year-old pretty easily. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And so these 2 girls arrived, and apparently they had to take the CTA that day or something. And I remember I was like, ah, this is interesting. Who are these 2 girls? I see them, and I recognize them instantly. They were 2 girls who are siblings. I didn't find out until this point. They have 2 dads. So their dads are gay, which I have respect for. I'll talk about that more later if I have time. They they had done my main camp for the first week. One of them was a redheaded girl, another one was not a redheaded girl. But I remember the redheaded girl because I remember I'd see her around. I remember she did Pokemon cards, whatever. But they were in my group, and guess what? There were 2 other girls in my group who also did the other camp. One of them also did the first week purple group, but she didn't know like the other girls who also did first week purple group, whatever. And she was also a redhead, so I think she was a redhead. She was both, but she had a big nose. That's all I can say. A weirdly big nose. She was a cute girl though. Don't worry, I'm not saying she's ugly by saying that, but and I remember her too from the first week. And then, anyways, I'm trying to think of how to continue this. I feel like I'm running out of time. I'll just make the floor out of wood. Fuck it. No, I'll make it out of cobblestone. Fuck it. But, I'm trying to see how I continue this. I have to pee, but I'm holding in because, I'm gonna pee to leave anyway, so might as well not waste time. I'll mine down here, why not? But, well, I saw them. I'm like, oh my god, I recognize you. And so we went straight into the gym. So, like, there were certain activities you do. We'd go to the gym of this place. And remember, I had gone in this place as a camper. This is the only camp I worked at that I also went to as a camper at one point. And so it was very nostalgic for me being back. Very, very nostalgic. It was shocking and nostalgic. I need to get an iron pickaxe home. And I remember when I was a kid, though, when I did it, it was not mixed gender. It wasn't boys and girls in the same group. It was just boys. But it was so much better now that girls were with boys, too. And we did, like, a game in the gym. Like, some gymnastics and stuff. We ran around. And then I didn't really talk to many kids except this one half-Asian kid, as I mentioned. Half-Asian, half-black kid. But there was a kid with, like, a Minecraft torch water bottle. I thought it was super cool. And there was this girl who had a sister who was a redhead who went to my first camp. And I started talking to her. I'm like, you went to insert name of my main camp. And she's like, oh, yeah, I remember you. You're the guy from the bouncy thing that we always chase around. I was like, yep, that was me. And we hit it off instantly. This girl really liked me as a counselor, I guess. And I really liked her as a camper. And so she ended up being my favorite kid that I ever interacted with over summer ever. And what's funny is both of our names start with the same letter. So, like, we started, like, being like we became like a duo almost, me and this girl. She was so much fun. And I guess to her, I was so much fun. And I want to say her name so badly because it's her name and my name go well so together. Not in a ship way. This is disgusting if you ever say that. This girl's like fucking 7. But in just like a cute way. And I remember one day I went to the beach and like I remember 2 of the other girl counselors were like, oh, you guys are like besties forever. I'm like, yeah, I guess, apparently. But there's so much more. I want to finish up the story about this camp. I don't know if I'll be able to before I can like do it. But anyways, this is week 6. I worked at this camp for 5 days. I got to work primarily with these 2 guys, but one of them, but I stayed for the afternoon, but the younger counselor would leave in the afternoon because it was illegal for him to work, as well as this redhead girl and the girl I got along with pretty well. She was only there for mornings. There were some kids who were there for only PM only, and some kids that were there for AM only. And she was one of the AM only kids, and it was kind of sad for me. But I had talked to her, and I was like, oh, you know, next week I'm going to be working at a beach because I just found out that I would get my final job posting for the last 2 weeks. For week 7 and 8, I'd be at the beach nearby my house. Not the same beach as I worked at, for like half a day that one time. This beach was actually really close by to where I originally worked, and we'd go to that beach. It's the same beach we'd go to every Friday at that camp, and at this camp, the sports camp I was working at, we'd also go to that beach. And she's like, oh, I'm going to be at a new camp at a beach too. And so we were like, oh my god, we're going to be at the same camp next week, or for the next 2 weeks. And we were so happy. And that ended up being false, because turns out she was going to the aquatics, or what's it called? Yeah, the aquatics camp, The one that like they stationed me at the at the arts version of it for a day. Because I was stationed there for half a day, but it's like the arts version, so it's like beforehand, and then we moved them to the aquatics. And this aquatics camp was really popular amongst people. It was considered the best camp in the town, and I'll get into that whenever I finish this fucking story because I don't have enough time. But it turned out she was going to that one. But I didn't find out until like our last day, until like the Friday or Thursday. But it was such a fun week this week. It was the most memorable week, and definitely the most fun week I ever worked. We do so much stuff. We played dodgeball. We play like different variations of dodgeball. We played basketball. We had like a whole gym. We do like soccer, and it was so much fun. We go to this like park nearby that I like to visit anyways. So it brought back nostalgia. And this girl and I just got along so well. We did like I did a thumb war against her, and she's like the only time ever a little kid was able to beat me at thumb war with me putting in full effort. Such a fun kid. I remember we'd like climb up a tree. There's like this tree nearby I used to climb, and we climb up or she climbed up the tree, and like it was so much fun. It was just, like such a fun week. And it's funny because I'd known this girl before, but I barely interacted with her. But just getting to know her, being in the same group as her, we hit it off. Such a fun kid, by the way. Like a legendary fun kid. And I'll never forget her ever. And she, like, since she went to the other campus, she actually knew some people. Like, I was telling her about, that counselor I didn't get along with? I talked to her about that. She's like, oh, I remember that guy. And remember this girl who, like, did a drawing for me, who, like, I got along with pretty well? She talked about her, too. And I remember this crazy girl I talked about. Her name was Sophia, I think. I name-dropped her. She also knew who she was, too. She's like, oh, I know that girl. I paired up with her on the beach day. Like, because we had partners and we go to the beach and stuff. It was just like, wow. What a fun girl to hang out with, but it sucked because she was only there in the mornings. I remember she has gay parents, and so one time a kid was asking her, like, her and her sister, like, wait, who's your mom, though? She's like, I don't have a mom. And I remember I was looking at the other counselor, the younger one, who I work with, and he was like, cut this conversation, bro. We don't want them to find out. Because she was like, I don't have a mom. I just have two dads. And we're like, well, because in my head I'm like, well, someone had to fuck someone to produce you, like, you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't have just been, like, born, you know what I mean? I thought it was super funny. So we had to cut that kid short who was trying to ask her about her, origins. Her and her sister, but her sister was pretty fun, too. Her sister was this girl who, like, she would, like, bark like a dog sometimes. And I remember her from doing that at the other camp, because at the other camp that they were at for the first week, I actually knew her sister more than her. But at this camp, it was more the opposite. And I remember asking her sister, like, oh, yeah, do you still bark like a dog? And she literally does, bro. But it was so much fun with these kids. Like, I remember we had so much memories. We played dodgeball and stuff. And it was just a good time. It was a good time. Trust me. It was a good time. And so there was this other counselor who I work with primarily in the afternoons. She was 15 years old, black girl. But she acted a lot older. She was such a fun girl to work with. She was so nice to me for some reason. Like, usually that type of stereotype, not to be stereotypical, but to be stereotypical, wouldn't get along. I wouldn't get along well with, like, a black girl who would, like, be on TikTok all day. But we got along pretty well. She was super nice. And her little brother, who was, like, 12 years old, went to the camp, but he was, like, in the older groups. We'd only see him at, like, the start of the day, end of the day, at lunch or whatever. And he was like a mean kid. Remember how I mentioned there's this counselor named Kevin who like I went to middle school with? He was like in high school with, but I only really talked to him in middle school. He was mean to me in middle school though. But he remembered who I am and I remembered who he was, so he remembered who I was and I remembered who he was. And I say it was hypocritical that he was telling kids to behave because in middle school he like misbehaved so much and like he like apparently watched porn in middle school too, according to my brother. He actually liked this kid. He was like, that kid's my favorite kid. But this kid straight up accused me of having a crush on his sister. And that freaked me out because I'm like, first off, I don't. Like, your sister's not even my type. Second off, I'm 19. Your sister's fucking 15. Like, shut the fuck up. I literally wanted this kid to shut the fuck up. Because it's actually kind of scary when someone accuses you of liking. Obviously, this kid didn't think about pedos at all. He just said, you know, you talk to my sister a lot. You have a crush on her, probably. And she even asked for my number one time, and I actually gave her my number. Just because, like, you know, we could be friends. Like, we don't have to be, like... Being friends with someone is fine. especially because we worked together. Of course I was going to give you my number, right? And he was like, she definitely likes you, or you definitely like her. And I was like, no, bro. And this kid was such a menace for some reason. This kid, I hated this kid. Except I kind of liked him too. And at one point, I started, like, I think it was on our last day too. I talked to him. He's like, the only reason why I'm mean to you is because you were mean to me, man. And I was like, no, I think you're chill, actually, despite the fact that you tried to say I have a crush on your sister, dude, who's fucking 15. Like, no. But, anyways, I usually work with her in the afternoons, except for the beach days. So, because we go to the beach in the morning, our group. So we went to the beach twice. We went on Wednesday, and we went on Friday both times in the morning, just because of the fact that the Friday was the last day of the session, so they wanted to do something special. And so, yeah, we went to the beach 2 days, and then that's the time I got to talk to her. And there's this other girl counselor who was only there in the mornings, probably because she was also too young. So I barely talked to her, but apparently she used to be part of our group, so like some of the other counselors knew her, including the 15-year-old girl counselor I talked to a lot. So I talked to her barely, but I remember she hugged that half Asian kid one time. So I remember the half Asian kid, his mom was here one time talking to us, and she was like, he's a good kid, except he just needs hugs sometimes. Or he needs like comfort sometimes or whatever. And I was like, cool, whatever. But then at the same time, he was actually hugging that girl counselor. And I remember his mom straight up said to us, he also was pretty cool with the ladies. It was me and like the older counselor I worked with, who was like 15, the guy one, and we were just laughing in our heads so hard, like, the fuck? Like, imagine you just see like a teenage girl who's a counselor hug like a little boy, and his mom's just watching it like, he's good with the ladies. Like, it was such a funny moment. But his mom was chill. She actually bought us popsicles that we distribute every Friday, I think. So I was only there for one Friday, so. But the 15-year-old girl counselor I was with would always like hand out the popsicles to us, even though the camp director of this camp told us like, don't take popsicles. She would always get popsicles anyways, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna say no to a popsicle. It's like right here in front of my face. So the counselors were so like chill. They had the most chill counselors ever. Like, they didn't give a fuck about the rules really. Like, you weren't supposed to touch kids. We ended up there was a point where we started like picking up kids just to give them like rides on our back, and I did it a lot. It was so much fun. So there's this. I mentioned this one girl with like a big nose. That's the only way I could describe her really. I don't know how else to describe her. Who was at my camp or in my group. I used to give her rides a lot. And also this girl who was at my camp for 4 weeks, actually. But she was in, like, the little kid group, the green group, and I never talked to her. I used to give her a lot of rides. And so I got to know one girl better just because we moved to a different camp, which is nice, too, actually, because of the other girl that I got along with pretty well. This is why I can't describe this story now. It's such a hard time storytelling this. But, because you're probably confused who I'm talking about, honestly. And I can't do it without saying their names, and that would be not very legal, so, yeah. But, the girl I got along with very well, we went to the beach twice, and I kind of felt bad because this girl, like, keep trying to, like, hold my hand, like, we'd have kids partner up or whatever to go to the beach, to walk into the beach, and she was like, you're my partner. It was so cute and so innocent, but, like, I didn't want kids touching me all the time because, like, it technically wasn't allowed, even though, especially not at this camp, they didn't fucking enforce it at all. So sometimes I'd, like, I was kind of mean. I would, like, straight up, like, pull out my hand from her grip. I felt bad for doing this. Like, I generally felt bad for doing this. Just filling up this water right now. But, we went to the beach one time. It was so much fun. We went swimming and stuff. Hold on. Well, I think you guys heard what the fuck that happened. What happened there? It's like the first time ever I think I haven't been able to mute in time when someone comes in. You can hear them. Yep, I literally have fucking 5 more minutes, bro. So, I'm gonna finish up this story really fast. I might even go into more detail about it in future streams, just randomly. But didn't I talk about this like a couple streams ago? I did talk about this camp a couple streams ago because, uh, like I think on the stream before I storytelled, I also told like a little bit about this camp, just because like as a follow up to like last time I had streamed. So I'll finish it up quickly. We went to the beach. It was so much fun. I remember going to the beach. Earlier in the week, they had gone to the beach actually too, and their other counselors went to the beach or whatever, and my dad and brother were there, and so apparently they confused my brother for me for a tiny bit, because I'm a twin, and remember I think it was at the end of the day or around the lunch break. I was chilling. I just had these random kids come up to me who they were in a different group. They were in an older group, so I barely interacted with them at all. But they told me, they sort of came up to me and said, "We saw your dad at the beach." And I was like, "What the fuck? What? Like, what? What do you mean by that?" It was super funny. But, yeah, I had a very good time going. It was a pretty long walk to the beach. I remember we'd pass right nearby where my old location where I work. And I would tell that girl that I was super close with, like, "Oh yeah, that's where, that's you know where you went to camp there. I went to work at camp there," and she was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that place," and it was so much fun. And I actually had, I talk about my camp L's, where like I'm like, "Oh, I couldn't deal with these kids that were misbehaving, and I don't want my boss finding out about it." I had a camp W, so we were on our way back from the beach. I think the first time we went, so like on the Wednesday, and I remember we were trying to get the kids to walk faster because they fucking walk slow as shit. And this 15-year-old girl counselor I work with, she was nice to me, but she was pretty good at yelling loud at kids, which was super cool, honestly, good. And even she couldn't get these kids to fucking go. And so you know what we did? Or I just said, "Hey kids, there's a dinosaur behind you running after you," and they all started running, and it worked. And we even used it the next time we went to the beach. It was on the Friday. So that worked, and that was like W for me. They're like, "Wow, good thinking." I'm like, "Thank you." But yeah, we had a fun time swimming and stuff. When we go to the beach as a camp, we have to usually like surround the kids in the water. But in this one, I was just allowed to. We had too many counselors, so like I was just allowed to like swim around and play with the kids. And that girl I got along with pretty well. I swam along with her. And I forgot to mention, but the previous day, we were playing soccer in the morning. And I like fell on my ankle and twisted it. And at first it didn't hurt that bad. Like at first it hurt, obviously. Like the initial pain hurt. But then I felt fine. And so like I just just chilled out. I still was able to do exercise, but then in the afternoon it started hurting so bad and I couldn't even walk. And so I had to limp home. I had to put ice on it. It was such a bad experience. I remember watching like TV at my parents' house, like in so much pain. But then randomly like 9 o'clock in the night, it healed. And it felt so much better. And I was like, what the fuck? How did it go from like being horrible pain to like being fine? Okay. Unfortunately, I have to finish this story on another stream. But we're making good progress. Actually, we made like fucking 2 weeks progress, bro. There's more details I'll have to mention later. Like the Friday, the last day of work, whatever. Or Friday, last day of week 6, but yeah, this is a long summer story, and I'm forgetting a lot of details. But I'm not mentioning a lot of details. My summer was just super fun, guys. So yeah, I gotta go. I'll be back in 2 weeks, not 3 weeks. I'll be back home in 2 weeks, so October 1 will be over when I come back. So we'll have time to